Welcome to the Nate Gratian Show, where we talk all things personal finance, investing, and entrepreneurship. Today is the 8th of October, and we are doing an eToro portfolio report on what's happened this past week in our portfolio, the events, and we're also going to look forward to next week. Did you know that this podcast is on YouTube, where you can comment below and connect with me on there as well? And on YouTube, I also do 1-minute shorts throughout the week that share what's happening in the market and what we're doing and things like that in our portfolio. But let's start looking into this week. It was a big week that started off strongly in the first 2 days, and then it took a bit of a downturn in the last 3 days. Before we dig in, I do want to welcome all our new investors, known as copiers on eToro, that's started investing with me, and people that are following me there on eToro, where we do our investing. Thank you for investing with me. Thank you for following me, and I'm excited to see where the future will take us. But this week, with all the volatility going up and then the last 3 days coming down, our portfolio did finish the week up 1.52%, which was a nice way to finish the week. Nice to have a positive week, and 1.52% is a pretty solid week to start October. This week we did invest funds into our account. We added funds on Wednesday, the 5th of October. That was Australian time. And so we added funds pretty early in the morning into our account that equaled just over 1.5% of our overall portfolio. These funds we invested over Friday and Saturday Australian time, both pretty early in the morning at the time. And we invested them with the majority going into SCHD, that's Schwab's High Dividend ETF. It does pretty well over the long term with capital growth. Over the past 5 years, it's done over 40%. And it also has a annual dividend return of 3.73%. It holds about 104 companies in this ETF and pays the dividend out quarterly. And so we have it. It's part of our income producing category, which is our ETFs or holdings that do pay slightly higher dividends. But this one also performs well in its capital gains that it returns each year. It's actually performing better than the S&P 500 is this year. Speaking of our income category, we did receive dividends from this week from our holdings in SDIV. This is a Global X ETF that pays a monthly dividend, and we received holdings from it this week. It pays basically that first week of each month pays out a dividend, and we take those funds and invest them back into the market. On eToro, it gives you the funds as available funds, and you can invest them wherever you like. It doesn't automatically put it back into where you received the dividend from, which I really like, because we took those funds and invested them into SCHD. We also invested a very small portion of our funds into VOO, that's Vanguard's ETF that tracks the S&P 500, and that is where we take a little bit each time we deposit funds and invest into for our kids' college or their future, wherever they're looking at going when they go towards higher education or something like that. Let's take a look into this week. As I mentioned, the week started off very strong in the first 2 days. Our portfolio was up about 6% in the first 2 days. That's how strong it started off. And it started off very strong because it was how the previous week, the last week of September, finished being very oversold. It was quite oversold. And then also central banks around the world were raising rates, but not as much as people thought they were going to raise them, giving a thought that maybe the US may raise rates in October, but not as much as what people may have thought. And so a combination of being oversold and the rate raises around the world at some different central banks caused people to think, well, maybe we're closer to a pause, or just sitting and kind of seeing what's going to happen. And so the market took off with that. As we got to about midweek, it began to look towards Friday's jobs number, which is the big number for this week, and so it began to look towards that, and that things started to be hesitant. Wednesday, Thursday, things were hesitant and down a bit. Not terribly, but down a little bit, and as they just kind of hesitated going into the jobs number. The jobs number came on Friday, before the market opened, came in at 263,000 new jobs in September. This was cooler than showing that the jobs are cooling off, but not cool enough, essentially. And so the market did drop on Friday. Our portfolio dropped about 2.8% in the day, and things went down on that day. And so with that, that's where we sat, finishing the week about 1.5% up. The jobs number, as I have mentioned in previous episodes, and I believe previous posts on eToro, and I believe previous podcast episodes, the jobs number is one of those numbers that needed to really thread the needle. If it's too cool, then everyone fears recession, essentially, and a strong recession. If it's too hot, then pretty much the fear is wage inflation, and it's going to continue pushing inflation up. This is where it needs to thread the needle. Now, something I want to point out is you will hear negativity all over the news. You'll hear it everywhere, and this is where a little bit too far on either side, and you get people being very negative. And there's a reason analysts are quite negative, because if they're positive and they're wrong, then their careers are almost done. If they say everything's good and they're positive, and they're positive about the future, and then they're wrong, their careers are in danger. If they're negative and they're wrong and it goes up, nobody really cares. They're excited that everything's going up and stuff's doing well. If they're negative and they're right, then they're a genius. That's just the way it works. And so I do want you to take note of that really, either way the jobs number went, if it went too far either way, people were going to be negative one way or the other, that you saw online. Personally, I like to be positive, and I realize and I look at the history of the market, and through all these volatile times and all this stuff, the market has continued to go up and continue to gain ground over a period of time. If you're invested for the long term, you'll be okay. Don't let these volatile weeks and days and months throw you off course and throw you off focus. And then in other news, Elon Musk has agreed again to purchase Twitter at $54.20. That's the other news for the week. That when that letter came out and was read, Twitter shares jumped 22%. So that's in the other news. Now, as we look forward to next week we've got the big stuff like CPI, and the CPI inflation number. That's the inflation number, or the consumer price index. That will give us a lot of information. So that's coming out on the 13th. That'll be Thursday, the 13th US time. And then we really start digging into earnings seasons as well, starting with the financials. So some of the big banks will be reporting next week. We don't intend on depositing any funds next week and making any new investments. We're going to keep things pretty stable, pretty steady as we go through the week, as we go receive these numbers and get more Fed speak from different people on the Fed, and then as we receive these numbers and start going into earnings seasons as well. Earnings season starting with the financials. So we're going to keep things pretty stable, pretty steady, and not jump around too much in what could be a volatile week. And remember, volatility doesn't mean it's going down. It just means there could be some quick and sharp movements, and we don't want to try and trade and jump in and out and around when the seas are rough. People who do that tend to get tossed overboard. But thanks for joining me here today. If you're looking for more episodes, you can find more on anywhere podcasts are found. Just search The Nate Gratian Show. If you want to connect with me, you can on eToro. Also, Instagram, that's just at Nate Gratian. My website, ngration.com, that's ngration.com. And now on YouTube, where all these are going, and those shorts. Just a few weeks into it, and it's exciting what's kind of happening over there, and being able to connect with people, and you can comment, and we can start a conversation on there. But so that's YouTube. Just search The Nate Gratian Show. But thanks for joining me again today, and we will see you in the next episode.